Hello everyone and welcome back to NPStation. In my previous video in the Coding for Kids in Python video series, we have learned about all the operations we can do using lists in Python. In today's video, we are going to be continuing on in chapter 4 of the book Coding for Kids in Python, written by Mrs. Adrienne Take. Today, we are going to be covering a very important topic from the programming world, which is if statements. If you guys do know how to code, you should probably know what if statements are. If you don't worry, because by the end of this video, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I hope you have all watched my previous videos in this series in a sequential order and share the series with your family and friends. And I know probably some of you guys may be getting bored at home, but don't worry because you have this whole series to watch and I'm sure you will have a blast because you're basically learning a new language in coding. How cool is that? And also, at the end of every chapter I share with you guys, I'm also doing another video for the fun activities for that chapter. I always leave a link down below in the description box so you guys can access those fun activities on your own and try them out. And before we got into this video, make sure to click that subscribe button down there in the corner so you can join our reading/coding family. And now I'll see you all over at Google Colab. Hello everyone and welcome back to NPStation. So like I said, in today's video we are going to be talking about a big topic in the programming world, which is called if statements. I am sure many of you guys are familiar with it if you know how to code. If not, you have clicked on the perfect video to watch. Before we get on to if statements though, how about we talk about tuples? Tuples are another type in Python that holds a collection of items or objects. So they're very similar to lists and everything. You know about lists is most likely the same for tuples. So this means they are ordered. They are ordered, can be accessed with indices, work with slice ranges, and can be made of the same or different types of items. However, there are two major differences between tuples and lists. How about first we go ahead and open Google Colab. There we go. So let's open all these notebooks and we're going to go ahead and click on Python 10. So can you believe it, guys? This is our already the 10th video in the Coding for Kids in Python video series. So like I always say, before we get on to today's video, make sure to check out part 9 of this series because there are some very important things that I was sharing and we're definitely going to be restating them in today's video, so please do check that out. Alright, so tuples use parentheses to hold their items instead of the brackets that we use with lists. So this means that they're created like this. So how about we create something like RGB colors and equals, so it would be red. And of course, we open the parentheses, no brackets, and we always have to separate our items with the single quotes. So and then finally we have blue. Okay, so the most important difference of all is that tuples are immutable. Alright, so remember, immutable means unable to change. I had actually gone over mutable and immutable topics in my previous video, so please do check that out. Alright, so this is a very important difference tuples have from lists. Adding, removing, or changing the contents of tuples is not possible since this is a special characteristic of tuples. So this means methods like the append and remove functions and del will not work with tuples. Again, I had gone over all of those functions in my previous video. Well, you guys are probably wondering, when should I use a tuple and when should I use a list? That, let me tell you, is a great question. For the most part, lists will probably be the type to choose when dealing with collections of items, and a big sign that should nudge you to use a tuple that is that the collection of items you'll be storing should not be changed. Our earlier tuple is a great example of this, as the RGB colors can't change and never should. Alright, so that was a very, very small topic about tuples. Now let's move on to if statements, my favorite. Alright, so for just a moment, try to think of all the decisions you make in a single day. Even if you narrow it down just to the morning, there are already so many things to decide. Do you wake up when your alarm rings or hit the snooze button? For me, that would definitely be to hit that snooze button one more time. And when you finally get up, what outfit do you choose to wear? What do you eat for breakfast? Or do you skip breakfast because you're already running late? Well, though it may seem like a hassle, our lives are much more flexible and interesting because we can make so many decisions. Not surprisingly, decision making also makes our Python programs much more flexible and interesting and therefore much more smarter. So just as we make decisions in life, we can make decisions in code by using if statements. An if statement is a block of code that allows you to control the path the computer will take when it executes your code. This is important because when we write more complex and longer programs, we don't really want the computer to run all of our code, right? We only want to run certain parts of our code when it makes sense or when we decide it's the right time to do so. If statements give us this decision making ability. How, you ask? They allow us to set up a condition that needs to be met before any additional code is executed. So this condition is usually a Boolean expression, which is a condition that the computer evaluates and decides is either true or false. So you can think of Boolean expressions as yes or no questions, where of course a yes would be true and a no would be false. Pretty straightforward. So when your if statement's Boolean expression is true, it tells the computer that it should keep going onto the next line of code. Then the next line related code is usually right after the if statement and is indented. Indentation is the amount of space that comes right before certain lines of code to help the computer group the blocks of code that belong together. I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with indentation, like from ELA class, because I'm sure that many of your ELA teachers stress a lot about indentating or about indentation. So like to indent your first paragraph. So I'm sure that you know what indentation is. So guess what? We use that in code too. Here's how we write an if statement. So how about we go back to that previous thing I said about hitting that snooze button. Alright, so first I'm gonna go ahead and write what this variable, which will be called mood. So how about we write tired? Okay, so we have our mood down. Now let's write if okay. So if mood equals, and now we would write two equal signs. Remember, two, because it's equal to, and then open our single quotes and write tired. Alright, so now what we're going to do is write a colon at the end outside of our single quotes. And if we click enter, you guys can already see that it has already made our indentation. So we don't have to do that. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and write maybe hit underscore snooze button, right? Because of course, if we're tired, we're going to hit that snooze button. And that would of course be true. And that's our Boolean expression right there. Alright, and click enter again. And now we're going to add in our trusty old print function in there. And how about we write a statement in there? So for me, I'm going to write Neha is tired, so she hits the snooze button. Pretty simple, right? And I hope you guys are following along with me so you guys can add your own output that you want to get in your print function. So because you surely don't have to write exactly what I'm writing here. All right, you guys ready? Let's click that run. There you go. Pretty logical, right? So if our mood is tired, we will probably choose to hit the snooze button. So here's what's happening. So in this scenario, the Boolean expression we are determining is our mood. When the computer gets to that line of code, it asks itself the question, is the mood equal to tired? Well, it either answers, yes, the mood is definitely equal to tired, which means this Boolean expression is true. So this means I can keep on going to the next line of code. Or it says, no, the mood is not equal to tired, which means this Boolean expression is false. That means I cannot keep going on to the next line of code. I'll have to skip to the next line of code, I'll have to skip to the next line of code I see that has the same indentation as this line. So this is important to remember, as the computer will only keep going to the next line of code after the colon if it can answer yes to the question or condition you give it. So if it can't, it skips that code and finds the next line that isn't indented. What if we aren't tired though? Well, what if we want to get up right away because we had a good night's sleep? Well, we can add that decision into our code too by using an else if statement, which is shortened to elif. Alright, so go ahead and add in another code block. So we're going to write the same thing as before. So if mood equals to tired, and open the single quotes, not tied, tired. Okay, so close that, and of course we add the colon after we end the single quotes, and go ahead and click enter. And now we're gonna write the same thing. How about instead, to be more efficient, let's copy and paste. Always remember this, guys, because it's way more quick than typing the same lines that you've already typed over and over again. There we go. Alright, so that kind of, oops, there we go. Alright, so there we go. We wrote the same code that we had written above, and now let's add on to this. How about we go ahead. Oh, alright, so there we go. So now what we're going to do is write elif, just like that, and then elif mood, there we go. Elif mood is equal to, how about well rested? That's a pretty good word, isn't it? Okay, well rested is the word we're going to choose for this. And again, we're going to write that in the same format as the one that we wrote if mood equals to tired. We're going to again write that colon. And then what we're going to do is write like get out underscore of underscore bed. And that would, of course, be true, right? Alright, so again, click another enter. And now we're going to add another trusty old print function. And how about we write here, Neha is well rested. And she's already out of bed. Yay! I got out of bed, guys. Congratulations to me. Alright, so here we added an elif statement to our code. So how about we go ahead and run this? Alright, so we got a syntax error. And it says print Neha is well rested, she's already out of bed. So it's pointing to this right here. Let's see what we got wrong. Okay, so let's see. So everything's right. Let's see what's happening. So let's do that again. Period. Close the quotation marks. Oh, I think I just spotted the problem here. Alright, so we forgot to write the beginning of we forgot to add the first set of the double quotation marks. That's why we got this whole syntax error here. Let's delete that and try to run this again. There we go. Now we got Neha is tired, so she hits the snooze button. Alright, so that is the output that we got. So here we added an elif statement to our code. Always used after a regular elif statement. An elif statement Oh, sorry. So I said that wrong. So always use after a regular if statement. An elif statement allows you to make a different decision if a different condition is met. So it's like asking a different question if the first one you asked was answered with a no. So using an elif statement is perfect for our example since we are checking for a different condition, which is mood is equal to rested or well rested, and we are doing something completely different if that condition is true, which is getting out of bed instead of hitting the snooze button. It's also important to remember that the code after our if statement is indented. Indentation is very, very important in Python as the computer uses these spaces to figure out which blocks of code belong together. So when you want to indent your code, move your cursor to the beginning of the line that you want to indent and simply press the tab key on your keyboard. So this will add the space you need in front of your code. So instead of clicking the space button multiple times, just go ahead and click tab. So after adding our elif statement, keep in mind that we will only hit the snooze button or we will only get out of bed. We will never do both. Here's why. So when the computer checks our Boolean expressions, it will keep checking each one in our code until it finds out that it's true. So once it does, it will move to the next line of code that is indented, run all the other lines of code that have the same indentation, and then ignore the rest of the Boolean expressions. In our example, the computer will be able to answer yes when determining if our mood is tired or not. Since it answered yes, it moves on to the next line of code that sets the hit snooze button variable to true. It will also print out our message, Adrian is tired, or Neha is tired, and she hits the snooze button, since that line of code is also indented like the one before. So since those are the only two lines of code that belong to that indentation group, and seeing that the next line of code is not indented in the same way, the computer will know that it is finished with the if statement. This also means that the computer won't try to evaluate the other Boolean expressions. It ignores the rest because once it finds a Boolean expression that is true, it is almost certain that the other Boolean expressions in the if statement would be false. This makes total sense. We can't be tired and rested at the same time, right? If we ask the computer, is our mood tired, it can't answer both yes and no. This is why the computer safely ignores all the other Boolean expressions in an if statement the moment it finds one that is true. Alright, so as you guys can see, we dealt with one syntax error in this video. So as you learn to code, you will deal with many different types of errors and exceptions. This is completely normal. Knowing what kinds of errors and exceptions you'll come across is very helpful, though. So let's go through some of the main types. So like I got in today's video, I got the syntax error. We've seen these type of errors, seen this error in today's video, right? So this error means that some part of your code cannot be understood or translated by the computer. Usually it's caused by an extra character in the wrong spot, a blank space, or a wrong character that is not even part of the Python language. So when you get these type of errors, keep an eye out for these common bugs and be sure to check your shell. Or like in this case, be sure to check all of your code. So it will usually tell you where the bug is happening. So because in this case, we had forgot to add that first double quote, but we eventually found out, and there we go, problem solved. The next one is called type errors. Type errors are data type problems in code. So these can happen when you use a data type that the computer is not expecting, or if you try to use a data type in a way that is not allowed by that data type. So for example, If you have some code that needs integers as your parameters and you pass strings as your input, you will probably get a type error. The next one are exceptions. Exceptions are issues with your code that are only found when you run your program. This means that your code can be translated by the computer with no problem. But when it actually performs the actions in your code, the actions themselves cannot be done or cause an issue in another part of your code. A very common exception is one called a zero division error. This exception happens when a part of your code tries to divide by zero. So the original code you write may not have any code that clearly divides by zero, but you could have a calculation that happens whose result is zero. If that calculation is then used somewhere else, like in another division calculation, it may then cause a zero division error, even though you didn't mean for it to. As an example, let's say you have some code that takes cookies and divides them by the number of kids available. So you expect these two variables to be used like so. So it would be, what we write is def and then divide cookies equally. There we go. Everything spelled right. Alright, and now we open the parentheses, and inside let's write cookies and kids, comma, kids. Alright, close parentheses, and outside we are going to write that colon. There we go, and click enter. And now, of course, it has already added our indentation, and then now we're going to write return cookies, and then slash kids. Okay, so that is what we wrote, but what if you passed like into your code 10 cookies and 0 kids when your code finally executes like okay, so let's see. So of course, now what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and write that. Okay, so divide cookies equally. So I could have actually just copied and pasted that because it would be more quicker or faster. But alright, so now this is the different part. We're going to add a 0 and then close that. So it tries to do this. Okay, so there you go. That is a zero division error. So don't be afraid or disappointed if you run into these or other kinds of errors. It's part of coding, and it can actually help you think about how to solve many different kinds of problems. It will really stretch out your brain. So like if you ever feel stuck or frustrated, just take a break, walk away from the computer and do something else, then come back with a fresh mind and maybe a snack. You will probably see what the error is when you return, or at least you'll have the patience to keep investigating. Coding can sometimes be very tricky, so that's why sometimes I get very frustrated, but you definitely shouldn't because it's all part of your coding experience. Alright, phew, we learned a lot more about strings in this chapter 4. I literally did this is my third video in the chapter 4 topic. And so we learned how we can work with some of the operators. And so what we learned, this is like a review of what we learned. So strings can be added together to create new lists, right? Strings cannot be added to numeric data types. Strings, however, can be multiplied, which is awesome. So we were also introduced to our first mutable or changeable data type, which is the list. So lists are a collection of items of the same data type or a mix. Lists use brackets to hold their items. Lists are ordered and start at 0, which is very important to remember, guys, because remember the indexes in lists always start from 0, not 1. And also you can grab specific objects within a list using an index. You can change lists by adding, reordering, and deleting objects within them. And we also learned in today's video, we learned about tuples, which are immutable, so unchangeable data type, so similar to lists. Tuples can be used in many of the same ways as lists. Tuples use parentheses to hold their items instead of brackets that we use for lists. Tuples are not changeable, which is their most important distinction, and tuples should be used when the collection of items they hold shouldn't change. Finally, in today's video, last but not least, we also learned how to control the path of our code through if statements. So if statements allow us to make decisions in code. Indentation is very important and helps us group lines of code that belong together. If statements let us tell the computer which parts of code to run and how. If statements also use Boolean expressions to figure out what path to take in our code. Guys, so this was actually kind of this is still not the last video from chapter 4, because in my next video we are going to be doing fun activities from chapter 4, and I'm super duper excited for our next video, and I'm going to be publishing the next video as soon as I can, because I'm sure many of you guys are waiting for the next one. I hope you guys had followed along of what we were doing in today's video. I know today's video was a lot of talking, not much of code, because in all the other notebooks that we had, it's usually like more than a page full of code. Today, not really even half, but at least we learned a lot in the from the Python language, right? Well, I hope you guys had followed along and enjoyed, and since my comments are not disabled, sadly, you guys can actually go ahead to my social media channels, which are all listed down below in the description box, and comment down below there and tell me what other outputs that you put in your print function, and tell me what you got. Did you also get all those errors in yours? Because like I said, always, it is definitely okay to get those errors in your code, because it's just it's like you're going to be learning more if you get errors, because you're going to spot more small things that you've written wrong in your functions. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and please do stay tuned on NPStation so you can see my next video in the Coding for Kids in Python video series. And have a great week, guys, and stay safe, stay home.